That's it, Al. You're doing great.
It doesn't feel yet. Yeah, we're still in a state, a general state of awe that the film is so well received that we get to travel and share it as much as we have. And yeah, this is, I think, the first thing that we've won. And yeah, what a unexpected surprise, yet we welcome it, or speaking for myself.
Definitely. I think, feeling like the movie is something that's connecting and resonating with people outside of ourselves, and also even outside of our own context in which we made the movie, I think is really special, and it's humbling.
Right.
Yeah, you gotta have distance from things to really understand, Some people are like, how's it going? I'm like, you've never asked anyone who's in the middle of surfing a wave, how's it going?
You're on it.
Yeah, you wait till they get off.
Yeah.
And bad metaphor, but you know what I'm saying.
We get it.
The film Nickel Boys is an adaptation of Colson Whitehead's novel, which is about a young man named Elwood who unjustly gets sent to a reform school and forms a relationship with another young man named Turner. And yeah, the not consequences, but the result of the relationship and how it spans the years and the effects, being seen, what the effects of being seen has on the human psyche, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be asked to take a look at it, and by Anonymous Content and Plan B, who owned the rights or had the rights. And I asked a friend, Jocelyn Barnes, to co-write with me. And we were fortunate enough to get the script greenlit. And from there, got to meet amazing department heads. One being Jomo Fray, who was the DP. With the story itself, what was attractive to me was clearly the relationship between Elwood and myself as a young, black boy in an American context who has something go wrong in his life that sends him in a specific direction. And aside from the other things I'm thinking about, the narrative that I relate to, like the desire to do poetics in a time period in which the visual poetics don't quite exist from our perspective, at least as much as they should. I grew up middle class with a lot of love, and how terrifying was it to think that at any moment in time my life could go astray and kind of everything my parents had done would be null and void to the momentum of systematic oppression, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I truly was kind of floored when I saw RaMell's documentary Hale County this evening in 2018. I feel like I remember when the movie finished, I was at one of the showings at Sundance that year, and people cleared out, and it was just me sitting in the theater because I just kind of couldn't comprehend what I had seen in the cinema. I really was just deeply moved by everything RaMell created, both as a director, as a documentarian, and as a photographer in that movie. There were just so many images that still I don't think I have fully unpacked yet in my own mind. So then when the concept came up that RaMell was working on another movie and he was working on a narrative movie, I felt like Hale County was just so subversive as a piece of form, as a documentary, that I just felt like I needed to do anything in my power to be able to sit down and talk with the person who had made some of those images and were thinking about the images for adapting a Colson Whitehead book.
Thanks, Jim.
Hey, of course.
Yeah, moving to Hale County, Alabama, which for those who are interested is in the Black Belt region of the South. And if you don't know what the Black Belt is, gotta look it up, No time to explain in this moment. It was pretty life-changing for me. I was making images, and I think at that point had learned to make something that was interesting and beautiful, but kind of did not have a purpose outside of that. And that is pretty devastating as a artist or a wannabe artist to for your work to feel a bit hollow to oneself. And so working with the young folks there in the community and photographing them with a Tachihara 4x5 camera began to really genuinely understand, or felt like I was understanding, what the image was doing and what it was doing wrong, and that it is just as much a blessing to civilization as it is perhaps a curse. And with that developed, I think, a language that could satisfy myself, that was a lot more reflexive, a lot more emotional and poetic, and trying to approach consciousness in a way that was about experience in cinema and relatively in photography, and less about narrative and less absolute, one could say. And fortunately was able to sort of adopt a lot of those ideas for Colson Whitehead's book for the adaptation. Yeah, one thing that's interesting with Hell County and the idea of POV is Hell County feels to me like POV, and I think it is, to the extent that, without my hands being in front of the lens to indicate that, I'm quote unquote the author, the way that photography and film conceptually and theoretically erase authorship and present the world as like truthful and objective is something that I'd love to take a stab at addressing, specifically in the context of the history of Southern photography. And with that, I think when was pitching the film with Jocelyn Barnes, I used 3 scenes from Hell County as sort of proof of concept. The camera moves in very, very, very similar ways, but it's interesting to take that concept and then develop it, with Jomo, and someone who has a very distinct and articulated relationship between, the cinematic image and time and the community from which I emerge.
Yeah, I think that from the very first conversations with RaMell and I, it was always a question of how do we not necessarily show what sight looks like, but how do we show what it feels like to see? Which sounds similar, but I think that there's actually a difference in it of where does the gaze go? Where does your eye go? And who are these boys? And I think that was something we would always talk about, where if Elwood and Turner were alive today, who would they be? And I feel like the answer we kept coming back to is they would be filmmakers or visual artists. Like there's a way in which they see their own lives poetically, that they're taking it in and they're creating images as they're moving through space. So, I think that towards that, and almost taking the idea of photography specifically, and I think that that's something that RaMell just always really brought to the table in a really strong way, is that what is a frame and what is in your frame, what's out of a frame, what's on the edges of a frame, what is that saying about everything that's happening inside of it? And I think that that was kind of the way we tried to make this movie, truly trying to think of it as every second was taking 24 single images, and each of those 24 single images needed to stand up against scrutiny of being an image that was like visualizing the world at any given point. So I think towards that, and I think again things like the decision to have 4:3 as an aspect ratio, the decision to shoot primarily on telephoto lenses, was again to try to create the way in which it feels to see, the ways that our eyes drift over things in a room, and then we create meaning through the juxtaposition of all of those items, and then we create the understanding of what the space is based on how all of those things together kind of connect. So yeah, a lot of what we see and what we don't see throughout the movie was us trying to, maintain the tension, create the conflict, but also to kind of reflect the process of sight and how it feels to, especially sight by 2 black boys in the Jim Crow South, where truly a glance could be the difference of life or death. What does it mean to look around space? Where do you look and where do your eyes rest and where can't they rest is kind of always a question we were asking ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And if you take this approach seriously, because it can be only theoretical, and then you can, get a wide shot because you want to have some coverage or something. If you take this literal concept of what it feels like to look and see, you have to ask yourself in moments of trauma what a person is seeing and what they are experiencing. And you realize, you might realize that cinema and photography kind of intensify objectification. They always present things to be consumed in a very specifically reductive way. And we, decided in the script writing process, and of course it translates to all of the shot listing and translates to the way in which the camera, when Elle was punched in the face, how do we, do we show the fist hitting the eyeball? Like, how do we display this violence? Most people aren't looking at the violence that's happening to them when it's happening. They're trying to cope with it. They're looking in other directions. They're focusing in on some detail. And yeah, also given the history of Black people being overrepresented with violence happening to them, taking point of view, sentient perspective seriously allowed us to really, really play with vision in a fun way, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.